What's going on, Headliner Nation? Kyle back with your Week 7 waiver wire show here on the Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everyone had a great Week 6. And whether you're dealing with ineffective play, injuries, bye weeks, it doesn't matter. Got a lot of guys in this episode that you should be taking a look at targeting on your waiver wire, fab bids, whatever it is that you use to acquire free agents in your league. Got a lot of them in this video for you. Quick shout out to my man Chris Kennedy because I was having trouble with my internet still. He helped me with some of the initial research and grabbing some of these players for me. So Chris and I combined on a lot of these guys this week to get you prepared for Week 7. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and we're going to talk about running backs first. We've got 7 running backs for you to be taking a look at this week, and number 1 is Latavius Murray. And no, nothing is wrong with Alvin Kamara, but Latavius Murray is getting more than enough touches right now that he could be used as a flex play in needed positions. Right now, only 37.3% owned, going up against Carolina next week. And over the last 3 weeks, he has 34 carries for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a 4.5 yards per average. So Latavius Murray, even though nothing wrong with Alvin Kamara, again, need somebody to stick into your lineup. He's a guy that you know is probably going to get some touches. Even though he might not have a high ceiling, if he scores a touchdown, he's more than made up for being in your lineup that week. Frank Gore and the Michael Pirine from the New York Jets. Both of these guys under 50% owned. Pirine coming in at 4%, Gore at 21.4%. Tough matchup next week against Buffalo, so not really sure you're going to want to pick up either of these guys and start them right away, but we could be heading towards a little bit of a split backfield here as well. And again, if you find yourself in a situation where you absolutely need somebody, either one of these guys might get enough touches in a game to help you out. Now, if I had to choose right now, Pirine would be the guy next week because I think he could end up seeing a little bit more in the passing game. Last week, Gore did have 11 carries and 4 targets, while Pirine only had 7 carries and 3 targets. But moving forward, I think Pirine is going to be a guy that's going to see a little bit more in the passing game, and in a game against Buffalo, who's going to come out firing on all cylinders, wanting to win that game big. I would expect him to get some targets in the passing game. Moving on to Justin Jackson from the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, last week, I didn't include him in the waiver wire show because he hadn't played yet when I recorded it, but I gave everybody a heads up. I included him on the screen. I said, just keep an eye on him. We'll see what happens. Well, he ended up having a pretty big game. 15 carries for 71 yards, 5 catches for 23 yards. He had 6 targets as well against New Orleans in Week 5. At only 12.8% owned right now, going up against Jacksonville. Definitely a guy I would be adding because Joshua Kelly, even though he started the season looking really good, every single week since then, it's been a little bit less. So right now, Justin Jackson, definitely a guy that really could be utilized more often than not. And he's definitely a guy I want to add this week if I need some help at running back. Boston Scott for Philadelphia, 3.4% owned, getting the New York Giants next week. Sanders is dealing with an injury. At this recording, haven't heard exactly what or how long. Sounds like it could be a couple of weeks. So if you're a Miles Sanders owner, definitely want to be taking a look at Boston Scott. Probably won't be that effective on the ground, but really could help in the passing game a little bit. As some of his weapons start to come back and get healthy, hopefully, for Philadelphia, it could impact them long term. But for right now, to get by with the Miles Sanders injury, Boston Scott, definitely a guy that you can add. J.D. McKissic at under 3% owned for those of you in full PPR leagues. Now, if it is half or standard, probably not going to take a look at this guy, but anybody in a full PPR league, he has at least 6 receptions and at least 40 yards per game over the last 3 weeks. That right there is a double-digit fantasy point week every single week for those of you in full PPR leagues. So again, if you just need a flex, if you need an RB3, if you need somebody to get through the week, honestly, J.D. McKissic might be the one guy that can get it done for you going up against Dallas next week. They definitely could give up more than enough in the passing game to him. So definitely take a look. Super cheap for you right now and can get you double-digit fantasy points. And really, that may be all you need just to get through the week. So keep an eye on McKissic as well. A guy that I also brought up last week. Again, this week, another low-end fantasy option for you to add. Gus Edwards from Baltimore. Now they are on a bye next week, which is always good. So I wouldn't spend a lot of fab money on him. I wouldn't spend a high waiver priority or anything like that. But Mark Ingram dealing with a little bit of an injury, could end up missing some time, could be ready by week 8. We really don't know yet. We hope it's the J.K. Dobbins show, but Gus Edwards at the end of last season kept getting the rock a little bit more. And then again, of course, going into the final game of the season when Ingram sat out, they used him quite a bit. So you never know. If Ingram has to miss, we could still see J.K. Dobbins get enough work in the passing game to be fantasy viable, but he's too highly owned. So Gus Edwards, another low-end option, a guy that won't cost a whole lot. You could hang on to him and everything could be just fine. This week, you might want to skip on him. For those of you in super deep leagues that have players go off the shelf rather quickly, I would take a look at adding him this week, even if it does take up a bench spot, because come next week, if we find out Ingram is going to be missing a week, he would be taken sooner rather than later. All right, time for wide receivers now. And my first 2 wide receivers coming out of Jacksonville, Laviska Shenault and Keelan Cole. Laviska Shenault, he's at 49.6% owned, so much higher owned than Keelan Cole at only 18.9%. But Cole might be the guy that we're adding over Shenault. The reason I throw Shenault out there is because he is averaging 6.75 targets a game over the last 4 weeks. So he's seeing a decent amount of targets. And depending on the matchup, this week getting the Chargers, again, could be fantasy viable certain weeks. My gut instinct, okay, a guy that I've brought up on this show several times so far this season, and I liked last year and did absolutely nothing, Keelan Cole. Last week goes 9-6, 143, and has averaged 6 targets a game this year. Chark ended up playing last week, and Chark had, a decent day, but he saw more targets. But Keelan Cole is at his best when Chark is the opposite him. So going up next week against the Los Angeles Chargers, a game that probably Jacksonville, again, is going to have to throw quite a bit. Next week, you could see Keelan Cole with another big day. He is a little bit boomer bust, in my opinion, so he's seeing enough targets that obviously he could put together a big game, but if he doesn't, he's probably not going to put a whole lot of fantasy points out there. For me, kind of a wide receiver 3 play for those of you that need help there. T. Higgins. How is this guy available in 26% of leagues across multiple platforms? Now, don't yell at me, okay? We see it in the comments all the time. Well, my league, we've had T. Higgins since the draft, and my superior league, and blah. Don't be like that, okay? Don't be that fantasy owner. No one cares about your league. There's hundreds of thousands of fantasy leagues out there. This information is for everybody. And across multiple platforms, T. Higgins is less than 50% owned for some reason. I have no idea why, but he's pushing Tyler Boyd as the wide receiver 1 right now. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 125 yards. If T. Higgins is available in your league, I don't care what you do, get him. Don't drop a stud for him, but get him, because T. Higgins is going to be a start for us from now on moving forward. Travis Fulgham from Philadelphia. What's this guy doing? He's kind of come out of nowhere, right? He has got touchdowns in 3 straight games and 23 targets over the last 2 games. He gets the Giants next week. Not really sure who's going to be on him. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that, but still a guy that you want to add right now, 23.4% owned, and the target share is insane for him this current time. Tim Patrick from Denver, 18.5% owned, going up against Kansas City. He's got back-to-back games over 100 yards right now, and even with Jerry Jeudy opposite him, he's still finding a way to produce, which has really helped, seeing how they missed Cortland Sutton, or lost Cortland Sutton for the season. Tim Patrick has really stepped up and helped them out. Back-to-back games over 100 yards. Going up against Kansas City, again, a game that they're probably going to have to throw quite a bit. Could be another opportunity for them to go over 100 yards. Mike Williams, one of my preseason under-the-radar sleepers, finally healthy. Don't forget, he got hurt in the preseason. Hasn't been 100% healthy, missed another game, and now comes back last week, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 109 yards, including just a fantastic grab down the sideline and 2 touchdowns. He's finally healthy. He gets Jacksonville next week. He should be a guy that you are absolutely adding. could have a lot of wide receiver 3 value the rest of the season. Adam Humphries from Tennessee at 5% owned. He's averaged at least 6 targets in every game this year. And Pittsburgh, even though they shut down the passing game for Cleveland this past week, has not been good this season against slot receivers. So Adam Humphries coming up here this week in full PPR leagues. Again, another guy that you could be taking a look at is an emergency option for you because, again, Pittsburgh just not that great against slot receivers this season. Brashad Perryman, he's finally back and healthy for the New York Jets, 2% owned. Tough matchup going up against Buffalo, so I wouldn't expect a whole lot from him next week. Obviously, more than likely, he'll pull Tre'Davious White. Crowder in the slot, still seeing double-digit targets a week, but Perryman in his debut last week, looking healthy again. 8 targets, 4 receptions, 62 yards. And again, a tough matchup. But if you get him now, you'll have him for some better matchups down the road. Darnell Mooney, I'm just going to throw this one out here for 0.3% owned, going up against the LA Rams. Why? Well, A-Rob's probably going to get Jalen Ramsey next week, and Mooney has kind of been the big play guy when A-Rob hasn't been able to. So there's definitely a chance that Mooney could go for a big score next week. That's why I'm kind of tossing that one out there for you as well. Kudos to Chris Kennedy for throwing that one on there and getting me thinking a little bit more about it. And then a guy that should be absolutely owned in all formats as well, Christian Kirk, 40% owned. A great matchup this past week. All right. He was a waiver wire ad for me last week. He was a start for me as well in my start sit videos. Had him inside the top 30 as well in my rankings. And as of this recording, 86 yards on 2 receptions for 2 touchdowns. Dude blew up. Excellent week for Christian Kirk so far. And again, it could be an even bigger week because I'm recording this in the middle of Monday Night Football. So he might even have more yards right now as we speak. But the week before that, 7 targets, 5 receptions, 78 yards, has really established himself as that wide receiver 2 on that offense. And definitely a guy that could be a wide receiver 2 in your lineups the rest of the season. My favorite segment of any show we do here, when I get to talk about tight ends. And those calls of Darren Fells and Trey Burton last week, Headliner Nation, feeling pretty good. So both of them are going to be included again on the Waiver Wire show this week. I got a couple of newcomers as well. Just wanted to toss out Dalton Schultz again real quick because, again, don't shoot the messenger. All right, I'm just telling you all across multiple platforms, he's less than 50% owned, coming in at 44.1% right now. As of this recording, he's leading the Cowboys in receiving yards against Arizona on Monday Night Football. Again, recording this in the middle of that show or in the middle of that game, so I really don't have the final numbers, but he's definitely been a target on that team. He is a guy that I like this week because of Andy Dalton's former connection with his tight ends in Cincinnati. So I feel like Dalton Schultz is a guy moving forward we're still going to be able to play on a weekly basis. He gets Washington next week as well. And of course, it all depends on Amari Cooper as well. A guy I've talked about a lot this season, might be a little bit banged up. And a lot of people talked about how I left him outside of my top 30 rankings last week. But I have an issue that foot's acting up a little bit more again right now. And I don't like to see that. So if that seems to be the case moving forward, Schultz is a guy that should continue to see plenty of targets. Logan Thomas, it would make sense that he scores a touchdown last week. After I started him for 2 straight weeks, he did absolute crap, and then I sit him and he scores a touchdown. So he's going up against Dallas next week. He's only 1.4% owned, 4-3, 42-1 last week. Hey, I mean, it makes sense. Maybe Logan Thomas is the new Mike Gesicki, or actually Mike Gesicki is still the Mike Gesicki. I can never get that call right. The dude just does whatever he wants to do. Anthony Fursker from Tennessee, 2% owned, going up against Pittsburgh. Last week, Jonnu Smith. Give me a second here to mourn. Jonnu Smith hurt himself. Haven't heard a whole lot yet about what's going to happen moving forward, but keep an eye on Fursker. If you own Jonnu Smith, you probably need to go grab him as well. 8 receptions, 113 yards, and a target or in a touchdown last week. Hopefully, Jonnu Smith gets back on the field and is healthy and ready to go, but if he can't for some reason, this is definitely a guy to add in his place. Darren Fells, 2% owned. He's got a touchdown in back-to-back games last week, 7 targets, 6 receptions, and 85 yards. Jordan Akins obviously banged up a little bit, going up against Green Bay this week. So, yep, 100%. I am more than willing to add Darren Fells again. Trey Burton heading into a bye in week 7, but still going to toss him up here for future reference. He was a guy I called last week that you needed to add on your waiver wires. He was my tight end 12, going to be right around that area, but again, they're trying to get him more and more included in the game plan. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 58 yards, and a touchdown. So again, if you have more pressing issues for week 7, probably don't need to spend a pick or a waiver wire selection on Trey Burton. However, moving forward into week 8, if Mo Alley Cox is still dealing with any injuries, or if they continue to get Trey Burton even more involved, we might need to be playing him every week because he could have some top 12 potential the rest of the season. All right, now we've come to the streaming portion of the show where I've got some quarterbacks and some defensive special teams to be taking a look at if you need to stream any of them in week 7. And I've got 3 quarterbacks right off the bat for you: Teddy Bridgewater, Andy Dalton, and Derek Carr. Now, out of these 3, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be the safest, 42% owned, so might not be available in a lot of leagues. But again, going up against New Orleans, probably going to have to throw the ball around quite a bit. Teddy B and that offense have looked really, really good this season, far exceeding even my expectations. I didn't think they would be that bad, but I wanted to see Teddy Bridgewater be able to make the big plays and push the ball down the field, and he's been able to do that so far this season. So good for them and that offense so far. Andy Dalton, maybe a little bit more risky. Again, recording this show in the middle of Monday Night Football, so I haven't seen the entire game yet at this point, but the first half was not good. So Andy Dalton, a lot of people who picked him up last week could toss him back to waivers this week because of a poor performance. He gets Washington next week. More than enough weapons on that team to make it work. And then my final one, Derek Carr, 20% owned for Las Vegas. The last time we saw him on the field, he was shredding up Kansas City. A big win for them. Tampa Bay is going to be a tough matchup, so he's a little bit riskier this week, but that offense was firing on all cylinders the last time we saw them. Then they get the bye, then they get Tampa Bay. So they could come out and put up another good performance against a strong defense, and Derek Carr would be right in the middle of all of that. For defensive special teams, I've got 2 this week for you to take a look at. Number 1, the Los Angeles Chargers going up against Jacksonville, and maybe they've lost a little bit of that Minshew magic, that mustache mania, whatever they were calling it down there in Florida. You know, the offense, you know, it doesn't look bad at times, but again, it doesn't look great either. They've got some big plays. You know, they were running the ball with James Robinson well. Last week wasn't as great, but they might not be running on all cylinders right now. And LAC is definitely a team that's been underrated on the defensive side of the ball all season long. So they could create some turnovers against Minshew this week. And then my other defensive special teams, well, that's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. Why? Because they get Daniel Jones. Well, you know, because of Daniel Jones and the Giants, anything is possible, including some picks, maybe a fumble, some turnovers, who knows. Now, Daniel Jones and the Giants offense just has not looked good all season long. So that would be another reason for you to grab Philadelphia and play them next week. There you have it, Headliner Nation. All of your waiver wire targets for this week. Make sure you run out there and start putting in those claims right away. If you've got any questions for me, leave them down in the comments below. Do me a favor, though. If you like the content and you appreciate it, hit that like button down below. And as always, if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, become a part of Headliner Nation today by hitting that subscribe button. Everybody, have a good one. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.